Now you
Oh,
get
that's perfect, actually. I
now
didn't
you
realize
get
you
to
had a
move on.
following power. That's so perfect, man.
So I usually don't have them in the background here. It's usually somewhere a little further away, and it's like white background. Only for you, once again. This
I
is my
love
dog.
it.
This is
I
Bolt.
appreciate it.
This is Bolt right here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like a supervillain right now. Like I'm stroking it. Like
Oh, my God. Perfect. You got it framed perfectly, man.
yeah,
You're
it's like
Hello and welcome to IdeaFire TV. Today I am very excited to be joined by my friend Jasmeet Singh, aka Bearded Maker. Jasmeet is a VC and a robotics expert who I'm very excited to talk about and explore a lot of different elements of physical AI, robotics, artificial intelligence, what the future holds, and maybe even get a little weird and existential towards the end because we like to explore the outer bounds of this technology, which is revolutionizing the world, as we know. So thank you very much, Jasmeet, for joining me today. Really appreciate you coming on here, and I've been excited for this episode since we've been talking about it.
I know.
So if you want to kind of give a little background about how you got into venture capital, how you got into physical AI, you and I have talked before. You have a very interesting background, so I'd love for you to share that with our viewers.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, first of all. And you're right. I've been so excited about this since we first started talking. And you kind of nerded out before.
Totally.
And it's always a great conversation. So I'm super excited about this. So my background, I would say, uh, my journey as a nerd started about when I was 5 years old, so 30 years ago. I was surrounded by old computers that my dad used to hoard, and these were outdated computers even by the time I was born, essentially. So these were the ones with 8.5-inch floppy drives. So these were super outdated. And then I think I was 5, 6 years old. I got my first sort of access to a laptop. I used to have robot toys from that my dad used to bring from Germany when he traveled. And so I always was surrounded by like electronic stuff.
Sure.
And that is one thing that he has transferred on to me, that I also hoard electronics now. So by the time I was in like high school, I was doing a lot of electronic stuff. It was one of my favorite subjects, and doing really well. So in those specific physics related subjects and chemistry related and anything science related. And then my older brother was in university at the time, and he was in electronics engineering, and he was studying in a different town. He used to come back home, and we would work on his projects together.
Sure.
So I was like 4 years ahead of time, essentially. So he's like 4 years old. And then when I went into my computer science engineering, um, I felt lost for a while. I was like, why am I doing computer science? I have no idea. And then sort of piqued my interest into the AI field and the AI aspect. And by third year, I was like, I can now combine the computer science skills I've learned with the love for electronics, and I can build smarter robots. I can build so much cool stuff. And I think third year of engineering, and that's 2008, I decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to build robots. I'm going to help other people build their robots, and I'm going to have a robot army at some point. And
You're all in.
absolutely, I was sure that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, like right out of the gate. So by the time I got into my master's, I was doing self-driving algorithms. I was working on humanoid research. I was working on computer vision applications, anything and everything that was related with hardware and AI. And then graduated that, worked with a couple of companies, early stage companies who were in that space. One I did was I was a remote intern for this company in the US, and who was building robotic parts. And I was also an intern in a warehousing company warehousing robotics company in Delhi. And one became a unicorn, one exited with, I think they got acquired. And I was not in those companies at that time because I had already started my own companies.
Gotcha.
And so the first company I started was 2013. And that is when the word JMoon sort of came into being. And JMoon is for Jasmeet's Moonshots. And every
I
single
like
thing
it.
I've ever done,
I love it.
and everything I've done since has been JMoon. Most of the brands have been called JMoon, JMoon Technologies, JMoon Makerspace, JMoon Labs, every JMoon Consultants. So everything has sort of been a mission to solve the problems of the ecosystem. What is the problem of why are there not more robots in homes, people's homes? That's the thing. That was the vision. So why do they not exist?
Right.
Um, so well, the problems are you could have hardware problems, some are technology problems, some are user problems, some are people didn't have access back at the time. A lot of people thought, robotics is just a costly hobby, and not a lot of people thought of it as a career option. So I just started solving all of those sort of problems one by one over the years, and that became my mission in life. And I continue to live by that, and continue to do all sorts of things in this field, and I'm always excited, and I can talk about robotics all day. So tell me when to stop. So you have to tell me when to stop.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it and I love it, man. It's clearly something you're very passionate about. And, I have a lot of respect for that. I think you need to, pursue, what you're passionate about. I have a lot of friends and colleagues that, they enjoy what they do, but they're not in love with it. And often that drives entrepreneurship, right? You
Yeah,
see you don't love what you're doing. You see some problems with it where it could be better. You go off, you try to fix those problems. So I
yeah.
have a lot of you know, respect and can relate to that type of passion for sure. So give me like a couple different examples of maybe like the top three or something, startup, physical AI startups that, and you don't have to say the names, I know some of that
Mhm.
is sensitive info, but the types of companies or the sectors or applications, that you see profound impact in.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah. So let me start by this. I
Sure.
think 5 years ago, if you had asked me this, my answer would have been very different.
Okay.
Before LLMs and before large models in general, my answer would have been very different because what we had in AI at the time was very different. I mean, we've had AI in robotics for a long time. Anything computer vision has
Yep.
existed for a long time. Machine learning has been around for a long time.
Sure.
The first self-driving car kind of came out in like 2004.
Yeah, was that
Uh,
Waymo? Was that
yeah.
Waymo?
Oh no, this was like I think Stanley, the one that
Oh,
won the DARPA challenge.
oh, okay,
So,
gotcha.
so I mean, the algorithms were still there. We were just perfecting it and kind of bringing it into commercial side, right?
Sure.
So, from that perspective, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have thought very differently. And I think 2017, 2019, I was working on a robot for households, and I was working on like a butler robot. I was like, well, clearly this is something I can build, but does it have commercial applications? Are people actually ready for it? So that was the
Product
missing.
market fit.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was the missing piece at that point. 2019, I kind of stopped working on it, and 2020, early 2021 was like when ChatGPT kind of took off,
Yeah.
and LLMs were now a thing. So the way I look at it, large models in general have solved some of the problems that we had before,
Sure.
which was in the adoption side of robotics. So before
Sure.
that, you were seeing a lot of industrial robotics. You were seeing robots that people were using were more used by people who understood robotics. So engineers building for engineers, not really commercial. What AI, the current version of AI, has done is essentially solve those problems. And now people can have a conversation with a robot. Now we'll start seeing social robots a lot more. People invested in social robots a long time ago. I think 2014, 2017 was social robots was kind of the hype. But now is when we'll actually start seeing a lot of that in the actual real world. So we'll see robots in like retail locations, restaurants. We'll start seeing robots.
Security bots.
Yeah.
Security bots in like office buildings.
Oh, 100%. So people will start interacting with them. Maybe not in their homes right now, in the next 2-3 years, maybe not in their homes, but ultimately that's where it's going to end up. Even if you don't have robots in the home, like most people live in an apartment, they barely have space for another human being.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not possible to have humanoids in their apartment. But people who do have space and, who live in houses, they can definitely get it. People who have chores that they don't like to do will ultimately be able to use those robots. So it's coming. It might be a little bit slow, but that's definitely where it's sort of headed. Agriculture is going to be a big sort of sector here in Canada. We're going to see a lot more stuff happening in medical field and the sort of elder care, health, and anything in health will also see a bigger sort of an impact. And physical AI is not just robotics. You've got anything hardware and AI. So when you look at IoT, from my perspective, is like IoT was never meant to be what your people these days call it. IoT was connected devices that actually talk to each other and actually do things on your behalf, and not just you controlling them through Wi-Fi. Right. So what we have right now is just smart devices or just Wi-Fi communication to those devices.
Yeah.
It's
not a centralized hub of devices that work together, share data, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So imagine you have one central robot as a butler in your house, and that can roam around and is kind of like the server and the controlling point, and that can control all of the devices around the house. So if you can turn on the coffee maker, if it sees you wake up, or your coffee maker learns from your sort of patterns, like, hey, this person wakes up at 7 a.m., then I need to make the coffee and make sure that the coffee is ready by 6:58 or whatever, right? So just learning from that aspect is the thing that was sort of missing, and we'll start to see more ubiquitous computing. Essentially, it should permeate majority of our lifestyle at some point.
No, I mean,
that's
I fully believe that and totally agree with you. I read a quote by I think it was the CTO of NVIDIA. I can't remember his name, but the quote was something like, in the next 10 years, we will have as many humanoid robots as we do iPhones. They will be that commonplace, whether it's, in-home butlers or assisted living or, traffic bots or security, whatever it is, so I thought that was an interesting kind of, and he's on the front lines, right? So
absolutely.
It's going to be interesting how quickly it comes.
It's sort of inevitable. So what's going to happen is right now, humanoids, I mean, like I said, I did my research in humanoids 2011, 2012, right? I invested in my first humanoids company in 2012.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Right. That was the first thing. Like right out of university, I was like, what do I want to support? What do I want to invest in? So I invested in 2 initiatives right out of the gate. One was a guy building a humanoid in California somewhere, and I had no idea about investing. I was like, I just want to support this guy. I will see how this goes.
You believe in his vision? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and the second was this humanoid student team out of Switzerland, and they were building humanoids. It's called Roboy, ROBOY. And now they've actually spun off into a company in the last couple of years. And so those were the first 2. And then I supported humanoids. I think there was another team in India that kind of came up in 2015, and they were building humanoids. They have like 5 patents, 6 patents. They've been around the world competing in competition and humanoid competitions. So we've come to a point where the electronics of it is kind of done. The capabilities, the mechanical side of it, how to work, how to make it walk, how to make it do certain things, like the small, tiny little humanoid. I don't know if you can see that tiny one. that can do push-ups, that can do Gangnam Style. That right? I mean, so you can make humanoids dance at that scale. So you just scale that up. It gets tougher when you scale it up, but we've gotten to a point where that's done. Now the only piece left is how do we make this how do we put like big batteries on top of this, because they require a lot of power. So how do we power them? Because if power is an issue anywhere in any device, so you either put large battery packs on top of it, or you have to have electronics that is not as energy consuming, or you have to attach cables to it. So industrial environment works if you have the cables attached. If you have, you can just charge it, it's constantly on the go. So that aspect is going to come first, the industrial applications of humanoids. The second thing so to have it in the actual outside of industrial environment in retail spaces, then you need to have a really good sort of battery backup and make sure that it can last 5, 7, 8 hours on one charge. Because then you're competing with an actual human.
Yeah.
If the human is able to work from 9 to 5, 8 hours on the go with a little bit of break, then you have to have a robot that sort of matches that or exceeds that. So we don't have that yet. So the battery is kind of an issue, but we'll get there. Not really a big issue. We've seen a lot of improvements in that tech.
Not bottleneck to have, right?
Absolutely. So, and the better the batteries get, the smaller they get, the more efficient they get, then you start to see actual home adoption, because now it doesn't take like hours to charge this thing. You can actually charge it within an hour. It runs for like 5 hours or 6 hours. That kind of stuff is then possible to do, because imagine an extremely heavy humanoid falling somewhere in the house, right? And falling on top of your TV or running into your table or something. You don't want that to happen. So it can't be 6 feet tall, maybe 4 feet, something sort of in the light mid weight range, and something that doesn't breaks apart, when you're at home. So something does go wrong and doesn't actually hurt your furniture or somebody else. So those kind of considerations, once those are tackled, we'll start to see actual like in-house adoption. And at that point, you're right, it'll be like iPhones. Aside from
It just makes me think. I'm just thinking out loud here, but like, I feel like agriculture and farming already is a massive application for robotics, right? We see more and more advanced machinery in fields on large farms, doing pretty, complex, rigorous tasks, right? And either they're remotely controlled or they're controlled by GPS, and, they know where to go. What if we figured out a way to like, have some larger, farm robotic machinery that had like a solar polymer like skin or something that could like charge in the sun, or use like kinetic energy, how like regenerative braking, like something like that. Maybe those are places to explore. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Power is always going to be a problem, right? I feel like
absolutely.
It's just a matter of efficiency and, figure maybe AI will help us develop, more efficient batteries,
Absolutely. Both of those are super interlinked. AI and hardware go together. If you see an improvement in one of them, the other one automatically improves. Without GPUs, AI would have been impossible to do. The training of it, right? Without Blackwell, the new architecture that's come out, you would not have. How many GPUs does that thing have? I have like 72 something in the box I have. So those kinds of things would have been impossible to do without the hardware. At the infrastructure layer. And then once AI sort of has more capabilities, then you start to see hardware on the application side and in-person side, and then you have robotics, IoT, batteries also a problem in wearable devices, right? You have issues in XR devices, and all of those are sort of battery limited. So once we get to a point that we can make sure that the battery is efficient enough, or it's only being used when it absolutely needs to be used and not just discharging automatically. So AI can help us improve a lot of that stuff as well. So sure, yeah, agriculture is a great application. Agriculture is like in Gen Z, nobody goes into agriculture. Nobody thinks of
Yeah.
agriculture as a career, right? So
I want to be a farmer one day.
exactly, nobody does that anymore. So 2 or 3 generations ago, maybe, but nobody now gets up and says, "I want to go into farming."
Yeah, they say ag tech, right?
Yeah, and we don't have enough people, to be honest.
Yeah,
Population declines happening already in the US, in Canada, in
Yep.
China, in Japan, and a bunch of other countries. So if that's happening, we don't have the workforce, we don't have the people, automatically those jobs are available. They need to be done, but we
Yep.
don't have enough humans to do them. And humans don't want to do them because they're either dirty, they're dangerous, or whatever. And so it's the right field for sort of automation to take over. And robotics, could be robotics, could be anything else, could be farm equipment, could be transportation, could be mining equipment, could be so many different aspects of construction could be solved with that. So blue collar jobs, I think overall are going to start to go away, mainly because nobody wants to do them anymore.
Yeah, they're also dangerous too. Like people die on construction sites and get injured, and then like liability insurance. Like I'm sure construction and development companies love having a robot. You know, it's less liability.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the big problems. Like, how are you going to get people to actually go into these fields when nobody wants to do them anymore?
Yeah,
People are always worried, like, oh, how my jobs are going to go away. Well, there's clearly the jobs are already going away. It's nobody wants to do them. So why not have one guy in handling a bunch of robots, construction equipment, and just doing all the construction by himself, and or monitoring just all the robots and kind of making sure that things don't go wrong. So now your team has shrunk from 100 people to maybe 10 people. Right. So that kind of thing is, or that kind of thing I think is going to start happening. It's inevitable. You have to accept the fact that it's coming. Yeah. So that's how I think about blue collar jobs in general. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do think it's inevitable. Yeah. So this leads to kind of a next question I wanted to ask about. So, I know spatial intelligence is key to physical AI, right? Understanding the physical world, especially humanoid robotics. So there's been a lot of, training with RLHF, and you see, like the figure 2 robot, then you see a human next to him with a motion tracking suit on, VR goggles, and it's mimicking the human in real time, right? And understanding the world. So in your opinion, like where are we with spatial intelligence? How much further do we have to go to the point where physical AI and humanoid robots have a better understanding of the physical world? I mean, we've already made leaps and bounds, right? In terms of dexterity and knowing how soft something is, squeezing an apple versus holding a baby and being gentle, right? And, maybe a robot is, carrying or pushing, someone in an assisted living home across the street. How do they know traffic, cars can kill you, right? Can they identify, where do you see spatial intelligence now, and like how much further do we have to go before physical AI has a much better understanding of objects, the real physical world?
I think we're not there yet. So people are trying to get to AGI, and before we get to AGI, you kind of have to do the spatial AI stuff, because if you want an AGI, an AI that's sort of, or a super AI, let's call it, where it sort of learns from its environment and does things on its own, you can't do that without sensors. You can't do that without actuators. You can't have missing pieces of information. If you do have missing pieces, you have to fill in those gaps somehow and make sure that it's able to fill those gaps in. For example, humans are great sort of we have so many sensors in just our hands, in our
Yeah.
fingertip, right?
Yeah.
When you're touching something, you can tell if it's hard or soft. You can
Yeah.
tell if it's hot or cold. You can tell if it's flat or, it has a bumpy texture. So
Right.
it's impossible to do all of those things with just one sensor right now.
Yeah. It's uniquely human, right? It's that one
Exactly.
thing we have going for us.
Exactly. So you have to have multiple sensors. All of those, combining the data for all of them and making sure that all of those, so you can't figure that out. What we've done is sort of replace it. And we've
Yeah.
said that apples are hard and you can squeeze apples.
Yeah. Right. With language, right?
Yeah. So we've given it instructions like the apples are hard, plastic bottles are squeezable, and metal bottles are not squeezable. So those kinds of information we've kind of filled in the gaps as humans. But a lot of this, if you want to have something that learns on its own, it needs to be able to fill in those gaps. Yeah. So from like the perspective of whether access that information from the internet, or it's pre-programmed, like, hey, this is what each object is supposed to feel like. And when you have something, another thing is, if let's say you have a robot on in the field, it's got some sort of sensors to detect friction, right? You need that, because how will you know if it's going on a grass or a plain field or rocks? The friction coefficient changes. You have to adapt according to those coefficients, and kind of, oh, this surface is a little smoother, I probably should walk slower, right? So those kinds of information gaps need to be filled. So a lot of engineers are working on it, and a lot of research is now sort of ramped up in the last couple of years, which is, I think, also why OpenAI kind of opened up their robotics division again. Even I think they shut it down in 2021, and now they're sort of bringing it back in, because AI is at a place where it's capable of learning those things. If you want your AI to make you coffee, you can't just have it watch videos on the internet of how to make coffee. You have to tell it, this is how you actually go to the kitchen and find the cup and take down the cup and hold the cup like this and not upside down. Right? So those kinds of things need to be either programmed, or you have to have AI that sort of learns, like, this is what the top side of the cup should look like. And this is when you're putting it in the cupboard, it goes upside down. And when you bring it out, you need to place it right side up. So those kinds of things are sort of where we are at in the AI field. Like I said, I think from the sensors perspective, we've gotten to a point where the sensors are now available. They're cheap enough that you can sort of deploy them. The only thing left is sensor fusion and sort of combining the data that you're getting from it and having AI understand all of that data, whether it's large language models or large vision models, large generative models. There's so many that you have where we can see a lot of stuff happening. So yeah, that's sort of where we are headed. I think in the next 4 or 5 years, physical AI aspect of it is the infrastructure layer, essentially, of what's going to lead to AGI. And robots and IoT will get there first, and then wearable devices will get there afterwards, because the only problem with wearable devices being the battery backup. So it's kind of slow. You have to have much smaller sort of electronics. You have to have much smaller devices with equal amounts of compute. So wearable will probably come in next. Robots and IoT, because they don't have that problem of battery, they'll probably get there faster. So I think that's how it's going to go.
Sure. Have you heard about this like massive warehouse AWS has built for simulation, basically training for robots, where they just they just have like a grid, and they test all of their like warehouse, logistics robots in it all through simulations.
Right. That's absolutely. I mean, you have to have that. But the good thing is that in those environments, it's structured. There's not a lot of interference. So you can learn everything you need to learn. But the moment you add 500 humans into that equation, then the robot needs to really adapt.
Right.
then things get messy a little bit. So that's
Sure.
when that's the challenge.
Sure.
It's you're building humanoids because we've built the world for access to humans. We've kind of built buildings and doors that turn in a certain way because that's how we access the world. But
Sure.
humanoids, if you want them to do the same thing, you're going to have to add a little bit of uncertainty, chaos into that equation and say, how do you respond when this situation happens?
Sure.
Because in the real world, it's not as clean cut, right? As a
Right.
warehouse probably is. So
Right.
that's what I think that's the problem that needs to be solved. And that's where we are sort of headed now.
Yeah. Well, I tend to agree with you. It's an exciting time, you know.
100%.
We have come light years ahead.
We've come way ahead. Like I said, 2019, when I shut down my Butler robot project, it was with two insights. I was like, I can build this right now. Electronically, everything is available. So my idea was central robot, Butler robot with IoT connections, Wi-Fi connections to all the hardware sort of existing appliances in your house. And then all the appliances sort of giving feedback on how long they were on, off, what time they needed, all of that information going into the central robot.
Yeah.
And I could have built that in 2019, 2020. The missing piece was the AI piece. And the second missing piece is psychology. Are people actually ready to have it in their houses? Do they
Sure.
trust it? Do they trust it enough?
Sure.
And psychology and user adoption is one piece that a lot of robotics people don't think about because we want to build cool stuff, and we tend to do that. And so, me included, I've had you give me any problem in the world, and my first solution is how can a robot solve this?
Sure.
And that's where my brain goes. And then I
Yeah.
have to stop myself and go back and say, well, let's think about, do I actually need a robot for this? Or can
Yeah.
I have other solutions to solve this problem?
Sure.
I think a lot of robotics people don't do that step where they don't go back. They go, oh, a robot can solve this. Let's build a robot.
Right.
So the psychology piece is kind of a big one for me on how I look at robotics companies and the adoption side of it.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. We're on the same wavelength, man. That's for sure. All right. So I want to get into just to go back for a second. I'm interested because you have a lot of experience in investing in physical AI. I'd love for you to share, with our viewers, just some simple green and red flags when you're evaluating physical AI startups, whether it's metrics, the team, the application, the product itself, maybe geography, but just some of the things that come to your mind, that are immediate kind of green flags or red flags when you're kind of evaluating, viability of a potential startup.
So, like you said, I've been investing in it, for a long time. I've invested in all sorts of things, whether it was a small amount or a big amount. I've had the experience to sort of build a lot of the robots myself. And people ask me all kinds of things, what kind of robots have you built? I was like, anything that has wheels or legs or fins or wings. I've built all of it.
That's so cool.
Right. So it's the way I look at it is the founder again just wanting to build cool stuff, or are they actually solving the problem? And that's the first step. Over the years, I've sort of looked at the whole market globally, and I actually built an AI a couple of years ago that distilled all that data down to like a simple equation. And
Wow.
so now I just have that equation. If your product is at this stage, if you are at if the market is at this stage, are you a growing sector, and how your customers are responding? It just kind of takes the basic metrics of a startup and says whether or not you're a good or a bad at whatever seed stage you're raising at. For example, are you a good seed stage company or not yet? If you're not a seed stage company, that means you're either pre-seed or you're angel. So it kind of analyzes what stage you are technically at. Doesn't matter what round you've raised.
Sure. Sure.
What, according to the metrics, this is where you are at.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you're saying.
Users, sure.
Exactly. So it does that sort of an analysis. The second thing I look at, or some people, when we're doing that analysis and equation, it also tells me if the founder is overconfident in what they've built. So it's like, oh, does this person say that they have everything and they're still at pre-seed and they have no hurdles at all, and the market is growing and they're like confident, they think they have all the
huge red flag.
Yeah, that's a red flag. So it tells me if a pre-seed company is saying that they are at a Series A, qualifying for Series A metrics, like let's take a stronger look at this and see let's see if they are actually at that stage. So that sort of things is just like automatic at this point. And then the second thing I look at is the founder psychology. And the founder psychology is, does this person know what they're getting into? Does this person have the technical skills and the team? Is this person resilient enough that if they don't raise funding, will they get there by themselves? Or are they doing it for the funding itself? What are the team dynamics? Which is one of the biggest things, I think, that sort of limits robotic startups, because CTOs are very engineer focused. CTOs
are not marketing people, right?
Yeah, so exactly. They're very engineering focused people, and they want to build the perfect thing before it goes out the door. So if let's say the CEO and CTO are sort of clashing on when the product needs to goes out.
Yeah.
Is the CTO more dominant in their decision making than the CEO? Does the CEO give in to the CTO? Those kinds of dynamics sort of I take a look at, not just the CEO, CTO, but like a whole founding team.
It immediately makes me think of OpenAI, like rush the product out the door, like it's ready.
Exactly.
Superline seems like it's not ready. We're leaving.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's not ready, how long is the timeline? Is it going to take them 2 years to just continue building this are they actually talking to their users when they're doing the upgrades, or are they just building in closed doors and just they think this is what it should look like and not talking to customers at all? So those kinds of things is like where the psychology piece comes in. The other things, so the other thing that I sort of look at in the psychology is just how the founder understands the market, how they perceive their users. Do they actually know what their users want? Have they sort of given time and effort into understanding the user behavior? If not, are they coachable? Can I actually teach them and say, this is what you're doing is wrong, and maybe pivot to this kind of a strategy when you're talking to your users? So are they able to actually listen to good advice or not? Or do they have just an ego that'll stop them from listening to actual positive sort of feedback? It's positive, but some people just don't like it. So those are some of the things that I tend to look at. From a startup perspective, at Angel, I think most angels who are sort of hardware people, they will invest in something that they think is possible to build. They're at the product stage. The founders go to them at product stage, like, hey, we want to build this thing. We have some extremely early prototype version of this. We want to improve this. And that's where angels come in to sort of improve that piece. At seed, it's pre-seed doesn't really exist in this space. So at seed, it's more about, now we have a product. How do we convert this into an actual business? And so seed funding is for that purposes. You've done the product building, you've gotten to an MVP, you've tested it out sort of at the almost close to PMF, and the market is responding well. You may have done a crowdfunding campaign to kind of get there. And that is when seed comes in, and now you're trying to build a business out of it and trying to get revenue out of it. So that's where the seed stage lies. And then Series A is when you have everything figured out. And because there's not a lot of investors who invest in robotics in general, so or hardware in general, what they want at Series A is everything needs to be de-risked. Because if they don't understand, what do you do if you don't understand a sector? You want as much de-risking as possible of whatever money you're putting in. So at Series A and beyond, a lot of people can come in if the founder has done a good job of converting the product and having a business and is revenue generating, has a good IP, has a good moat. At that stage, pretty much everybody can come in. So seed stage, I think, is where majority of the gap is. There's not a lot of VCs in the ecosystem that handle seed because they have no value add. They can't tell the founders, here you go. This is the manufacturing guy who will help you scale. You want 10 pieces, they can make you 10 pieces. You want 10,000 pieces, they'll make you 10,000 pieces. Right? They don't have, a lot of the people don't have those connections. Or let's say an investor says, well, this person is a good manufacturing partner. This one probably should not be contacted because they're going to steal your IP or whatever. So somebody with an experience needs to come in. Otherwise, the founders are essentially finding out these things for themselves
on the fly, which is very dangerous and ultra high risk.
So it's high risk for the investors at that point because you're giving the founders the money to experiment and that is not good. If you have those connections, if you could accelerate the process, if you had user insights to give them, and you said, oh, this marketing technique works and this one doesn't, the founders would not have to experiment as much, and they can scale faster. So I think that's sort of the missing piece at seed. But by Series A, software companies get to experiment and they can still pivot. Hardware companies don't get that consideration.
Right. Not as malleable, right?
Yeah, it's you have to have everything in place if you're going to raise Series A. Most hardware companies don't get that consideration of like, oh, you can still experiment and you can change things.
And manufacturing and logistics and supply chain and economic factors, political factors, like just all these different things that make it much more challenging than SaaS,
Exactly. So that's where it's absolutely. So that's all of that has to be thought of between seed and Series A, essentially.
Pure due diligence, right? Distribution channels, like you said.
Everything, logistics. How are you going to scale this? How are you going to sort of find the customers and make sure you can deliver in different countries? Because software, if you don't update it or something goes wrong, there's a glitch, you can push it out the door the next day. Hardware, something goes wrong, your device ends up in the landfill, and it's and it's on the newspapers and on like the front page, like this company failed. So those you don't get from a customer perspective. Also, you don't get that much of a consideration. Like if you're buying stuff, they're putting something in their house, then it better work and not explode. And internally or externally, like it needs to function properly and not battery shouldn't be exploding. So those things happen, and that's sort of the hardware consideration early stage. That's how majority of things go. Valuations are sort of super consistent. It's pretty cheap compared to software companies. The valuations are so cheap, and there's so much less competition that it's a steal essentially at seed stage. Like seeds, like I said, pre-seed doesn't exist, so the seed valuations are kind of like pre-seed in software. So it's like if you look at some of the old valuations of companies that have gone, unicorn, and you look at their seed round, it's laughable. I think something like Ring, I think they raised like a seed round, like a 1 million round at 2.7 something valuation.
That's it.
So imagine that. So the valuation is kind of consistent. It goes from approximately 5 to 10 million in the seed stage to 30 million at Series A and 100 million at Series B and then beyond. So it's pretty standard that
Yeah.
this is the sort of the valuation track record that's going to follow, and it has not changed. There's it's very hype resilient. I mean, sometimes as founders get invested because of the hype, but that hype is so short-lived that as soon as the hype dies down, the valuations are back to normal. And so I think that's kind of amazing about it. So that's why I'm like, you know what? This returns are great, valuations are cheap. Why wouldn't you be an investor? The only missing piece is that you can't add value add. If you can't add value add, founders don't want you at seed, essentially. They only want people who can actually add value. Most of the founders do, unless they think they can do everything. But yeah, so that's how I look at it. And that's sort of what the funding ecosystem looks like.
Sure. No, I know. I mean, it's still a very kind of untapped sector for venture capital. But so when you go in, are you typically you lead the round, or how often do you do follow on rounds with the companies you invest in?
It really depends. I usually try and target seed. Sometimes I see a deal that's close to seed, not fully at seed. And then I'll invest. If I think, the valuation is great at this stage, I'll definitely do an investment, and I do an angel. But most of the time I try and sort of come in at seed because I have the value add. I sort of bring the value. And the founders, that's where I get to interact a lot more with the company, and they get to actually use my expertise and say, well, this strategy is working, this is not working. So that's where I usually like to be. When I invest, I've done some follow-on investments. If it's growing well, and if I think it's got a great mission, if their customer base is increasing and they're coming up with new applications and they're working super hard, I kind of have done that. And that's part of the deal. Like, I have to find the investors who are going to invest in them at a later stage, right? So it's my job as an investor to make sure that whatever person I'm investing in can get to the next stage, and then the next stage. So that's where I can exit. Right? Once they get to Series C, Series D, that's when I can exit. So it's my job to make sure that they get there.
Right.
Otherwise, my investment's gone to waste, right? So it's my job to make sure that they get there. So that's how I look at it. And I've done a lot of sort of investing in all sorts of things. I haven't done a humanoid investment in quite a while, actually. I should probably, I think I'm gonna try and do that. Maybe in a couple more years. I need to see commercial aspect now. I've been burned in the humanoid sector. Like I said, one of the companies that I invested in kind of didn't go well because at the time there wasn't really a lot of applications. Even though his robot was, I thought, great. Application wise, it wasn't that they didn't really have a way to scale it, and I was new to that sector, investment in general, and was still figuring out how to build robots in companies when I invested. So now that I've gotten better at it, I look at it more strictly. So I'm more strict than other VCs, but I also bring a little bit more value out, I think, to the table.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to get into, I know you have a couple different friends we can see behind you there. So I think it's just awesome that you own several robots and looks like you've done a little bit of modification to them. So I'd love for you to take us and our viewers through a little bit of your friends there you've got behind you.
Absolutely. So this one is Bolt. This is my robot dog. If you've seen videos of me walking on the streets of Toronto with this one, and you've seen people reacting very, very either super enthusiastically or horrified at this. So it's either of the two. If they are horrified and they have a conversation with me, then their fears sort of go away. And then
immediately,
immediately. And they have a conversation, and then it's more about, can I do this? Can I do this with it? So they immediately go into how can I use this if I had it sort of conversation.
You flip
which
their
is
perspective just with a conversation. You
absolutely.
know,
So
if, you,
that's
if you're open to it, like I feel like that's such a problem. If you're open to it, maybe you can understand how cool they are, right?
absolutely. So I've had people who come approach me when I'm walking the dog and go, "Well, what is that? Well, what can it do?" My first response is, "What does your dog do?" And
Yeah,
right, so it's the expectations, and immediately you see the expectations from a real dog versus a robot dog are very different. People want a robot dog or a normal dog for entertainment. They want to love it. They want to pet it. They want to play with it. But a robot dog, they want it to be extra. They want something else. They want it more out of it. So that's when I tell them I take it grocery shopping and it can lift a bunch of my stuff on its
yeah.
back, and I can attach a cart on its back or whatever.
Or
And then
towing.
yeah, exactly. And that's when the conversation starts. Oh, how much can it lift?
Sure.
And how much can it pull? And oh, does this have a camera? And what can it do with the camera? And I had this woman come to me and said, "I'm losing my eyesight. Will this be able to sort of navigate the world for me?" And I was like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
Once you run it in the autonomous mode, you got the camera, you've got the lidar. You can sort of have it be a guide dog if you wanted it to be.
Sure.
Security is also a big part of this. And you don't, obviously, there's no food requirements or medical bills or poop picking up requirements at all. And I think that people really like that. So those conversations are usually common. Then you have, I think,
Well, wait. So real quick though. So this is the
yeah,
Unitree Go-To Pro that you have,
yes,
right? Okay.
yes, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So they launched it late last year, and I was like, I need it for my birthday this year. Because I need to have it because I used to be a distributor for Unitree actually
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember you
a
saying.
few years ago, and they came out with this model. Like, guys, can I have one? And they were going to CES, like in December. They were preparing for CES. I was like, I need one. Can you send it
Yeah.
to me by January? And they were like, yeah, sure.
That's
Um,
awesome. That is
so
awesome, man.
so I got it like the day after my birthday. I was like, I'm not gonna spend any more on electronics this year. This is the only gift. I'm gonna limit myself. I have, but I did not hold up to that. I still got a few more electronic gadgets over the
Yeah.
last few months. Then you see that is a humanoid, the tiny 30 centimeter tall humanoid,
Yep.
uh, who is called Mini Me, and he's been around. He's been around for almost 10 years because of Austin Powers as one of my favorite
Yeah.
movies.
I
And
love it.
I do feel like a supervillain sometimes when I'm stroking this guy. Um,
Laser
and-
on their head.
so yeah, people are kind of like I said, people are afraid when I take this out on a walk, and it's like, oh, this is so awesome.
Yeah.
So the mini me has been kind of was used to be a promotional thing. I used to take it to events and introduce people to this. It's meant for kids, anybody like 8 years and above. You can also do research on it, but anybody from 8 years and above can also use it from their phone and just play with it. And it's open source. You can sort of take it apart and use for research purposes if you want to.
That's awesome.
Uh, and the thing next to that is my 3D holographic screen from what's the company called? I forget. Oh my god, it'll come to me.
So it's
Uh,
a projector, like a holographic projector.
yeah, it's like a holographic screen that you
Awesome.
have, and it kind of you can view a lot of 3D stuff using that, and kind of if you want to look at a part or run animations of something. So that's a really good sort of screen to have.
That's cool as hell.
And then you have, I think, hold on, there's my robot arm right there.
Yeah.
That's the robot arm. That's from Elephant Robotics.
Nice.
And that's my cobot. And I program that randomly. Sometimes I'll sit down and kind of want to feel, the rush of being a coder again. I will open up my Python IDE and kind of connect it and start working on it, attach a bunch of different things and control motion and stuff. Next to that is like very tiny. I don't know if you can see. It's like a yellow thing,
Yeah.
right there, and that's the another dog, and that's like a palm top. It's like that the size of my hand, essentially. So that's a super small robot dog. I have a mid-sized one that I sort of build. I don't have it in this room right now, but there's a mid-sized one, sort of like a, I would say it's about that big, about the size of a laptop. So I have so three dogs, and then below that, I don't know if you can see right there. That's my spider robot. That's Aragog,
Yeah.
and he's been named
Okay.
after Aragog, Aragog. That's because of Harry Potter.
Sure.
Harry Potter has a spider called Aragog in the second book, so that's from that.
Love it.
And next to that is the Turtlebot 3, which is for if you want to do self-driving algorithms and you want to work on navigation stuff, autonomous
Also, it's like
operations.
roof mounted?
No, this is it's kind of like yeah, you could probably do any sorts of things, like anything that where you want to experiment with self-driving or essentially SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. If you want to, so it's got a LiDAR, it's got navigation algorithms. If you want to experiment with ROS, essentially that's a really good robot to have. I used to be a distributor for that as well. I think I was I was the first person to bring it to India. Sort of, I was the sole distributor for it for a long time. This one has a payload capacity of, I think, 5 or 10 kilograms, and there's a bigger one that has, I think, 15 kilogram capacity or something, 20 close to that. And so these are my robots, and on top of that, it's kind of getting propped out is my 3D scanned face bust that is scanned and sort of 3D printed, and I make it's just there. Sometimes I have of me, yeah.
That's awesome.
So I have all the tools. I have all.
Yeah.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Sure.
I have a separate bedroom for all the electronics that I have.
For your room, you mean for your roommates?
Yeah, exactly. So it's I live in a 3-bedroom apartment. One is my office, one is my actual bedroom, and the third one is only robots. I live a very minimalistic lifestyle. I have no paintings on my walls, no nothing. Only thing is my robots need a place. They need a room for themselves. So that I definitely need to have. So in that room, it's my 2 vices are in that room, essentially, electronics and books. That room is stacked with the robots and electronics of all kind and books of all kind. So yeah, those are my 2 vices. So
Would you be shocked if one night you woke up and one of the robots was reading the books?
I would really be shocked. I'd be like, what happened here? If it's gone sentient, I need to make sure that I am, from that moment on, that I'm super nice to it. Because my dog can talk. So I don't, it's not going to bark, but it talks. So I need to make sure that I'm nice to it from that moment on. If it's because from that, if it's remembering things, then I'm screwed. So yeah, definitely making sure that you're nice the moment that happens. This one luckily does not have any memory that it retains over time. The only thing it has maybe conversation. I have not turned on its AI feature where you can have like a chat GPT like conversation with it. So
it has a speaker that it can vocalize.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can activate it. I just don't do that.
Now, is that in the app? In the Unity app?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can have
open up a whole other set of features and analysis and data tools, or what exactly comes?
Yeah, so it's got kind of like your chat GPT interface. You can talk to it. It's the same thing. You ask it a weather, you'll connect to the AI and sort of respond to every query that you have. They have their own sort of version of the AI on the back end. I don't think it's chat GPT, but it's another form of LLM that they have.
Sure.
But you talk to your phone, and then this responds back to it.
Wow.
So yeah,
that is cool. So tell me this, Jasmeet. So especially with the Go2 Pro, like, do you have it set to, like, when you take it for walks, right? Which I think is just incredible. Do you put it in some follow mode in the app and it knows where you are based on the LiDAR and the cameras it has? Or is there like just a fully autonomous mode where, it just goes to a certain location or waypoint that you're also going to? Like, how does it work when you take it out? You don't need the app features for that. It just knows where you are and it follows you, or how does that work?
So there's 2, 3 modes that you can sort of run it in. The basic one is that you have your phone connected to it,
Okay.
and you're basically controlling all the motions. You're kind of like a remote control RC car. You
Sure.
can do all the motions, all the tricks. Everything is available in that mode. You can make it jump. You can make it run, walk, increase the speed, increase the height. If you wanted to crawl, you can do that as well. So it's very good in that mode.
Yeah.
The second one is it comes with like a small remote control, and you just hang that remote next to your on your belt, and
Okay.
essentially follows that remote around.
Got it. Okay. So
So,
that's
so
like the
yeah,
central
exactly.
follow.
So the remote has its own sensors to
Sure.
make sure the direction is being followed. If you rotate, the dog rotates.
Wow.
So if you are going around the curve, it will follow you and kind of stand right behind you on
Okay.
towards your right. The remote you hang on your right, it'll maintain about 10, 20 centimeter distance on the
Okay.
right and sort of be a little bit behind you and kind of stand right there.
Okay.
So that mode, it can follow you around and you can run and it'll follow you. If
It'll match your speed. If you start sprinting, it'll match your speed.
Yeah, so you can also do
Oh,
that, and you can have it in running mode and walking mode, and you can have it in um, the remote control also has a physical sort of switch that you can make it go forward, backward, left, and right. So
okay.
just the
You like
most
override.
basic features. Yeah, just the most basic features for overriding things. Um, if you go too far ahead and it sort of lags behind because it was in walking mode and you ran, it would find you and get to you and stand right beside you. So that's one of the cool modes that I really like to do. And the autonomous mode has a bunch of features where it then stops some of the basic features, and then obstacle avoidance sort of kicks in. It can sense if somebody's in front of it and tries to, if you're going forward, even if you're pushing it, if even if your
Yeah.
button is saying go forward, right? It's getting input from you to go forward, but there's an obstacle.
Sure.
It will actively avoid that obstacle, and it will say, well, how can I go around it? And so those are
And it
some
can
of the,
jump too. Like you can jump over things, right?
yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to, yeah, absolutely. It can walk up and down stairs, and it can jump over things, and yeah. The third mode is you put it on a leash.
I've seen that. I saw that in one of the
You,
videos you sent
yeah.
me. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you put it on a leash, and the slightest sort of pull that you give to the leash,
It
it'll
feels it in the
recognize.
servo. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you pull it like ever so slightly, it knows that it needs to move forward. And if you put it
Wow.
to the left or the right, it will follow whatever you're doing with the leash. So that
Sure.
leash mode is great for when you are in a public environment. You want to have, a better control over it.
Almost
Uh,
like a horse when you pull on the bit, right? On one
yeah,
side.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're at the park, then I let it go off leash, and then I have the remote control. If
Sure.
I am in a crowded environment, I usually like to have it in front of me and
Yeah.
use my phone app. But if
Yeah.
I want it to be behind me, on something, and then in that case, I just put it on a leash.
Sure. And is the connection strong enough where it's pretty near real time? Like there's not a lot of delay?
Yeah, absolutely. So the connection is actually pretty strong. If it goes beyond a certain range, which is like, let's say 20 meters or
Okay.
30 meters, if it goes beyond that, it will automatically wait for you to
Okay.
get within range,
Wow.
and sort of then tries to follow you, or then takes over the control. So even when I'm running it with my phone, it will not go out of sight if
Okay.
I don't want it to. There are ways to remotely sort of program it, control it remotely, all sorts of things if you were, doing a security thing. Um, and yeah, so there's like a port that you can just access the code and upgrade the firmware if you wanted to.
Sure.
But most of the times those are the sort of the basic features. It will not go out of range. I've taken it on to the beach. I've taken it in water. I've taken it, also on a sort of a small hike. And I've taken it to grocery shopping with me. I've taken it to public spaces of all kinds, to malls, um, to all sorts of places. So at this point, yeah. Maybe some more. I haven't. I think there's more to explore, and yeah, we definitely go have fun and on adventures together for sure.
That's incredible. So how much does it weigh? Is it pretty heavy or
It's pretty heavy. Um, I've had people sit on it.
that's
I've
hysterical. So I just
I've
had
had
this
people sit
hysterical
on it. So
today.
when people come to me and say, "Well, what can your dog do?" and I think that the dog can handle their weight, I say, "Go, why don't you try and sit on it?"
Yeah.
And so I've had people who are like super thin, maybe 100 pounds, 150 pounds, within that range.
Yeah.
This can handle it pretty quickly. It's
Oh,
like, yeah, it can adjust its leg and sort of its height
sure.
according
Yeah.
to that and make sure that, it doesn't fall. And so I've had people sit on it. So it's got its own weight. I would say it's about like 70 pounds,
Oh wow. Okay.
50 to 70 pounds. I haven't really measured the actual weight, but
Sure.
it's capable of lifting quite a lot. It,
Yeah.
I have
What is the payload for it?
the payload. The 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 company says 12 kilograms, which is
Okay.
about, I would say, 35, 40 pounds.
Sure.
I've definitely pushed it further with people sitting
Yeah.
on it, but
Yeah.
if somebody sits on it, it can't walk with that weight.
Well,
So
right. Yeah. It's like it
if
has to compress and
yeah,
absorb.
it can
Yeah.
sit on it, act as a seat, but for 12 kilograms, it can actually walk.
Okay.
So I
Wow.
think that's sort of the maximum capacity. 12 kilograms, um, easily can sort of walk with that kind of a weight on its back. If
Sure.
you attach something or a cart or something on its back, then it can sort of pull even more, because
I
then it's
bet.
not, all the weight is not on its on the top of it, so it's on the back, so it can
Sure.
pull a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. I had this hysterical, picture of you like having mini me riding on the bot down the street or in like a radio flyer red wagon being towed behind.
I should probably do that. If I did that, people would freak out. I've
Hey, it's
had,
just me and the gang, don't
yeah,
mind.
yeah, I think that people would freak the hell out. I've had
Especially
kids
if
right
you
on
weren't
top of it.
there. If you
Yeah.
had it in like remote mode and it was just, the go-to and like he's pulling mini me like without
Oh, yeah.
anyone around, people would be like, oh
What
man.
is happening? Yeah, so I think that would be hilarious. I should
Yeah.
probably try that. Somebody also gave me the idea. So I have a bunch of googly eyes, as all engineers,
Yeah,
good engineers do. You want to
of
add
course.
googly eyes to stuff. I sometimes add the googly eyes to my own bust.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add some bigger googly eyes to this thing, and so people are not as freaked out. It kind of makes it a more fun, I
Yeah.
think. So I'm gonna add that, and maybe then on top of it, mini me with smaller googly eyes on top. So we'll see. Definitely a lot of experiments to be done on that.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, no, so that brings me to another question. So it's fascinating to me how adding something so simple as googly eyes to a robot can ease that bridge of understanding and openness to the psychological impact
Right.
of seeing a robot and not relating to it but like, oh, okay, it's not harmful or that's kind of funny, right? Like,
Yeah.
so in that vein, do you see, where do you see like humanoid robots looking and acting, much more. like actual humans. I know obviously China's doing a ton of research with this. You always see on Instagram, I'm sure, these short clips of like this factory floor, and there's like all these computers and just like very human-like robots with full clothes, like very distinct facial expressions and textures. And so I know a lot of it's like AI generated, but some of it is real, some of the Unitree stuff and the Figure 2 stuff and Optimus. But where do you see like humanoid robots really starting to become much more indistinguishable from actual humans? Are we like five years out, 10 years out? Because I've seen companies like startup companies working on really advanced micro motors and actuators in the skin, so it can get those facial expressions and like trigger facial expressions based on its neural network and what it's hearing and what it's saying, so that there's like emotion and context connected to what it's saying, right?
Absolutely. I think we definitely are super close to that. I think we don't want to be. People are going to freak out.
We're ready, but most people are not.
Yeah, like robotics people are ready.
Yeah.
If we want to bring it out into the public, I think we probably could. Like Hanson Robotics was doing this 10 plus years ago. And so we could probably bring it out into the world, but would it freak people out is the question. So do you want your robot to actually look like a robot or a human? Because the uncanny valley is a very big problem, right? It's how close can you get to actual human facial features before you start to freak people out? And
fine line.
It's a very fine line. If something is off, people do not respond to it well. This is quite a few years ago, I think 2015. There was a university group that was buying products from me, and I was like, well, what are you using this for? And they said, oh, we're working on this animatronic face, and it's going to have a bunch of expressions. They're like, I want to see this. And so next time I was in their city, I dropped by and kind of took a look. It was kind of unnerving. It was not, it freaked me out. Because it was like,
that says a lot. So
it's like, something's missing here, right? There's a missing piece. It was not perfected at that point where it could look like a human. The expressions were good enough, but not great. Just something was just not quite right. And so that you can definitely have that in a horror movie for sure. So if you want, faces or something, absolutely. So for that application, that's great. But if you want people interacting with it, maybe don't even give it a face. Why do you need to give it? If people are okay interacting with a faceless thing,
like even a cube with an LED, right? Like that's what a lot of
a digital face. You just have a digital screen face, and
comfortable.
So if people are okay with that, why not do that instead? So
at least it's like a first step before we get
to before people to make sure people get comfortable. First step, googly eyes. Second step, the digital screen face, and then maybe work on the actual sort of synthetic face moving features and that kind of stuff. So you're right. China is working on it. Unitree itself has 2 humanoid models now. I remember I was a distributor for this South Korean company, the one that made TurtleBot 3. They used to sell. Their whole company is like humanoids, motors for humanoids, and so they used to sell a whole humanoid called Thor Mang, and they used to sell that for competitions and all sorts of stuff. And we've had it for a long time. It's just if you want to bring it out into the actual world, you might want to make sure that the impact is, people are okay with it, which is what I try to do with this. It's making sure that people have a positive reaction to this. I've had people. So when I've taken it out on the streets late at night, people are drunk. And I've gone into areas where there's a lot of clubs and people are drunk and people are getting out of these clubs. I've had people scream out of their cars run over it or kill it or whatever. And
Skynet is coming.
yeah, it's like if they're in their car and they're freaking out, you definitely don't want that reaction
Right.
in anything else.
Sure.
So there'd be a lot more damages. Luckily, more people are positive about it, and they're walking by it, and they sort of are okay. I had somebody take a couple of weeks ago. Somebody sent me a conversation from Discord that they were in. I'm not even in that Discord, and this guy says you're famous. And what was the conversation? Just some guy commenting on the fact that he saw a guy walking a robot dog on the streets of Toronto. And so just those things happen. And my hope is that people have a better sort of interaction with it. They have a positive experience with it so they can get ready for what's coming and it's not totally freaking them out. This is just the first step, I think, in that direction.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So I wanted to ask you, I know because you live in that world. Also, I send you endless WhatsApp messages about new models coming out and stuff like that. The long anticipated strawberry reasoning model came out recently. And I'm just curious, do you see, I know a lot of these, robotics and, some of the algorithms use ChatGPT and have used ChatGPT-4. Do you see major advancements or big, positive impacts with this new, reasoning model and long horizon planning and chain of thought? This pretty impressive capability we have now where, this model is beating PhD level physicists and mathematicians and scientists, in these different, benchmark scores. Do you see these types of advanced reasoning models, on our charted path to AGI and eventually ASI, having a big impact on these physical AI systems and devices and their ability to reason with the real world and also understand humans, whether it's language or facial expressions, body language, and all the things that come with that kind of advanced model?
Absolutely. So LLMs are definitely a big piece of that because language is how we communicate. And another way that we communicate is facial. So facial expressions, body language. So it's the LVM models, vision models are also super important for that.
Yeah.
Just these two are great for as an input into the robot. Right? Like, how do I have given it some sort of a context. I've said something in a certain way, just understanding the semantics of what I mean. Have I said it angrily? Have I said it as calmly? Or am I joking? Am I joking about, pushing somebody? Or is it going to actually do it? Or, or is it a command or is it an actual instruction? So understanding the difference between those nuances, LLMs are super important for that. And then you have the vision models are also super important for that kind of stuff where you understand facial expressions. Am I sad? Am I happy? If I'm sad, will my cooking robot suddenly start making my favorite dish so that it right? So it's just so those kinds of things will start to come up. Another way that we humans sort of interact with each other is through touch. So having those sensors. People want to pet my robot dog. It does not have any sensors on its body. People want to pet it.
Actual human,
it's just a natural sort of reaction that they want to pet the dog. It doesn't have any sensors on its body to detect those pets, but people still want to do it. So that's another thing that might come into a court incorporation where how close is this person to me? Are they feeling happy with my closeness or do I need to back up? Does this person have a weapon? Are they coming at me with a bat? Will this harm me at some point so they can step back a little? So those
do they have a pheromone detector that
absolutely. So dogs, it freaks out every dog it's ever interacted with.
Sure.
I'll tell
I
you that.
bet. I bet. Do they
As
bark at it or are they just like sniff around? They're curious.
as long as it's standing, they're okay and they kind of sniff.
Okay.
And if I move it, then they sort of take a step back and say, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
If it's on four legs, but it's got no smell, it has this sound of the motors coming from it. So what is this? Like, oh, not the motors, just the lidar. So it's
Right.
kind of like a whizzing sound. So what is this thing? So they're cautious of it, but some of the friendly dogs have had a better response. Um, but yeah, so the AI piece of it is the missing piece. As as AI gets better, it
Yeah.
will automatically, if we can deploy a lot of those AIs on, edge devices, and you're gonna have a lot of those things come in where it's just going to get better and better.
Sure.
You can have AI being trained on those devices, maybe. I don't think we're capable uh, enough to do that yet. But
Yeah.
edge AI, deploying AI on the edge or blockchain, that's going to be big. If you can gather data and sort of train it for each. So one of the big pieces of having robots in somebody's house is that it's got a basic model of how to function, and then it learns from its interactions with the family itself and improves based on what that family works
Right.
like.
And the
And
dynamics between the humans.
between that family. So if you want that sort of capability to happen, it also requires a lot of sort of compute that they have to take care of.
Sure.
So training AIs on the edge is kind of a thing. And then you have data security, cybersecurity needs to be sort of put in place, making sure none of the data gets leaked. Suddenly nobody's hacking into your dog at home and, capturing the data from it. So those kinds of things have to be taken care of. And with
Sure.
quantum, that's going to probably change. With quantum and AI sort of together, cybersecurity is going to be a problem. So hopefully we'll be at a stage where uh, it will not go into the wrong hands, and we can probably fix it and patch it up before cybersecurity issues arise.
Sure.
So that's going to be another sort of big thing that affects robotics and ubiquitous sort of computing in general.
Sure.
Yeah, so AI, large models, tiny models, all of these are going to improve hardware for sure.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned quantum because that was another kind of follow-on question I had. I'm a huge quantum geek. I'm constantly, watching videos and reading about string theory and superposition and, how we'll be able to eventually, really harness quantum computing because,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of quantum computers. They're very expensive.
Mhm.
I think quantum computing, especially like you were talking about, right?
Mhm.
Quantum encryption, right? That's a huge piece, but
Yep.
also just being able to process so much more data so much more quickly.
Yeah.
I believe, when we do get to a point where quantum is, more viable for, different applications, especially physical AI. Do you see a massive, massive shift there in terms of the intelligence, the capabilities in physical AI when we're able to combine AI and quantum computing into that whole ecosystem?
Absolutely. If we could get to that level, I even before that, I'm excited about what would happen if we had the Blackwell architecture into like a Raspberry Pi size, credit card size thing, right?
Yeah,
That's the first step. If we could have that, that would be massive.
yeah,
And then you have the quantum. If you could definitely, it's going to have a big, massive impact on the way AI is deployed and how it sort of scales. And the security is going to be a big aspect of it. AI running on blockchain and distributed sort of computing systems, networks, that's going to be a big thing.
yeah.
And once you have that, now imagine each sort of, let's say you've deployed thousands of robots in homes, each one connected to each other,
Like a hive
learning
mind.
from each other, sort of building, this is the right thing to do, this is not the right thing to do. This learning from each other some of the basic features, and then adapting to each their own sort of location, learning from that environment, and not leaking the data, but just
Yeah.
sharing what they've learned with the other robots in the swarm sort of network that they've built. So
Sure.
if you could have those sort of systems in place, and you can't have that without, like I said, the physical layer, the physical AI piece is super important for to get to that. If I have a robot and my robot has never seen a painting on my wall and doesn't know what a painting is supposed to look like,
Yeah.
and some other robot has in somebody else's house, they can tell, oh, this is what a painting should look like.
Yeah.
And I can bring it home and I say, this is what a painting is. Where
Yeah.
should I hang this now?
Yeah.
Do a scan of my house. Where should I hang this? Or ask my robot, hey, where did I leave my briefcase or my wallet the last time? So those kinds of things will start to happen. The smarter the AI gets, the better the robots will become, and that's how I envision the world. And
Yeah.
it's always been sort of my vision for it. 2008, even before I was really good at either the AI piece or the hardware piece, that's what I drew. I
Sure.
literally drew, I sketched it out and had like 7, 8 designs of robots of what would happen. On the hardware front, something I really want to see is room temperature maglev, magnetic levitation. That I think is going to be awesome.
Game changing.
And I had designs for what I would do if that became a reality in 2008. I tried doing some maglev experimentation. I was not really good at it, so I'm leaving it to the experts. But as
Yeah.
soon as that technology is viable and you can have it in the real world, I have so many applications in mind for it.
Yeah.
So least of which is the the hoverboard from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely. Marty McFly.
right?
Yeah.
So you need room temperature sort of maglev capabilities for that, and you need to have roads that have who are sort of like incorporated into the infrastructure, the
Sure.
maglev technology. So if it's you embed it in the roads, then you have the hoverboard going on top of it. That's how you do that. So I'm super
Or like charging, right? Like a car could
yeah,
essentially pull up over that space and charge from it too.
absolutely.
It's different. Yeah. Sure.
Absolutely. So there's so many applications, and when that comes in, I'm super excited about that part.
Me too.
So yeah, AI, quantum, and everything. I'm of the view that any piece of technology and science that we have either goes into robotics and how robotics is built, or gets impacted by the developments that happen in hardware and AI.
Sure.
And you, like I said, I use psychology for robots, right? People are always thinking, how does psychology compute? Material
Yeah.
sciences go into this. Battery chemistry goes into this. Um, there are things that people don't even think about that you can probably do with AI and hardware
Yeah.
sort of combined. So there, the combination, I love all of it, and I read all the research papers. Sometimes whenever I get the time, I go to bed and read research papers during bedtime for some of these things. And whenever I get the time, I do it.
I can appreciate that, man. Yeah. I sometimes I do the same thing. I think it took me a solid month to read Leopold Aschenbrenner's situational awareness research papers, like 165 pages or something. But I don't pretend to understand all of it, but it was fascinating reading it. It took me some time, but I stay up late at night reading about some of this stuff too, for sure.
I talked to a guy last week. He's working on consciousness, how to program that into robots. So things are coming.
Well,
Things are
well,
coming. So I'm excited.
yeah,
He says there's an architecture that he's built that could potentially lead to that, and he's seen much further applications of it than I have in the research environment. So we don't know where we are yet. Things can
yeah.
rapidly scale.
California has been was one of the states that's been pushing AI legislation pretty hard.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the first pieces is this obviously protecting SAG, right? Screen Actors Guild, using their likeness, even posthumous, and they've been trying to do that. And I think they reached a deal. But I also saw that, can't remember if it was Lionsgate or some major motion picture company just signed a deal with a huge generative AI company to basically start, integrating generative AI into the CGI and all the special effects and rendering different scenes. And so I think that was a big, kind of inflection point, because I have friends that are like, oh man, AI is just going to ruin movies. We're just going to have all, scripts written by AI. And I'm like, no, I think it's going to help first. I don't think we're just going to let them create movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I thought that was fascinating for sure.
Entertainment is a big piece of human life, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That's how we story tell. That's how we communicate with other people. So that's definitely a big piece of physical AI sort of coming into that field is also going to happen. You're going to see a lot more. There's a company in LA that is building like a much bigger version of that 3D hologram screen. It's a proto hologram. It's funded by, or I think Howie Mandel is sort of involved in that company. So he's friends with the founder, sort of as a promoter. So they've had celebrities sort of promote it from time to time, and they're putting those things in. I think they did UFC event. So UFC, the leader of UFC, what's his name? Dana White, I think.
Dana, Dana, right? I can't remember.
So he has a 3D avatar of himself in that holographic screen, and he's speaking Spanish. He doesn't speak Spanish. So they've used AI and combined AI with it, where whatever translation he's speaking, you can convert it into any language.
That's amazing.
They were talking about that. So I actually saw that deal.
Wow.
And they just did they just did a round, and they're sort of actively sort of doing a round. So I saw that deal, and I actually reached out to them. I was like, I've been following them for a while. I was like, are you raising around? And I love that space because, again, 3D is one of the things that happens, right? So combining the AI piece into that is definitely going to be impacting the way we communicate. And I don't know how big they're going to get with the screen size and now also as a company. But it's certainly got a lot of applications in digital twins, for educational piece, for a lot of like I said, entertainment piece.
Sure.
So 3D is sort of part of physical AI and how it's impacted, and even how it's built. So 3D is also a part of that equation. So a lot of cool things coming.
Yeah. That space excites me very much, 3D projection, holograms, telepresence, because I just imagine a world where, you and I could be building a space elevator, prototype, with in VR. You're in Toronto, I'm in DC, but we can see each other, we can manipulate objects, and the platform or system or physical representation of what we're building is, exactly the same for both of us, where we can literally collaborate in real time in 3D from different parts of the world. I mean, that's just so cool to me, because there's just brilliant minds all over the world, and distance sometimes can be a boundary, right? And so I just think that has so many applications, or having like a AI tutor or robot for every kid in a developing nation, right? Where they're at home and they have like a holographic tutor that's helping them. I think that's a big one.
There's a guy on Instagram I follow. He is working on the Iron Man mat, where he does a lot of puts things together and looks at the wireframe structures.
Oh, yes.
And stuff. Yeah. So this guy's building a holo mat, so he can actually do that kind of stuff. I mean,
that is cool as hell.
It's open source. He's sort of sharing it with the community, and he's building it out. And he's able to do a lot of things with that. So let's say he puts down an object on the mat, and says, what is this object? And it
Yeah.
says, this is a wrench. And then he takes the wrench away, and it still leaves a print on the holomat, is like a projection on top of it. And
Yeah.
now it says, now take this design and convert it into 3D and 3D print it for me.
Sure.
Right? 3D print me a replacement of this thing. So, so those kinds of things are starting to come up, and the more commercialized they get, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, you know, in the not too distant future where you have like a really big mat in a really big warehouse, and you just say, all right, let's build a fusion reactor.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, for
So those
sure.
kinds of things are I'm super excited about.
Me too. Me too. Those are the things that, you know, I have really far out sci-fi dreams about. So two more tech kind of subjects, and I want to get into the more um, you know, uh, future prediction kind of existential world of AI.
Sure.
Those two technologies are, you know, one, as I mentioned, fusion, right? I think China and South Korea have artificial suns, essentially, right? Where they've achieved fusion on a small kind of level. But, you know, how do you see fusion technology? You know, because we keep talking about power, right? It's the ultimate bottleneck, and batteries and energy, which is not infinite, right? It's super expensive. It's the main thing that's got us compute, right? That's what's got us where we are today. How do you see like fusion and fusion energy technology impacting, you know, or accelerating some of these elements of physical AI, you know, language models, machine learning, and, you know, all of the other subsets of AI?
If we could have that, you know, if you could have a sun being level of power, you're essentially solving all of the issues of power needs
Forever.
forever, right?
Yeah.
Or as long as you have the resources to give to that fusion reactor.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, because so in power, there's two things. There's power generation and then power transmission.
Sure.
Our power transmission is really bad because of just resistance of the wires, for example, right? It's transporting it from one place to another is super costly. If like 10% of or 20% of the power that's generated in a generator sort of reaches somebody's home because of that. So in remote areas, even probably worse. So I think that's a big problem, the transmission piece of it. So material sciences are going to help with the storage. If we can't get the storage better, we better have more generation capabilities. So we can get the fusion right, and we can get it to a point where even if with current battery storage and battery transportation capabilities, if we can just generate energy forever, that would solve all the problems for sure. People are going to fight over it for sure, because that's what humans do. We fight over resources. So whoever's building it better be the good guy and willing to share. Well, otherwise it's going to be a problem. But fusion definitely has a potential for just about everything in the way of life, essentially, right? Yeah, I hope, my hope is it actually we see the impact of it in the next 5-10 years on our daily lives, because we use a lot more power now, way more than maybe even 15-20 years ago, way before smartphones. Smartphones use up so much power. The day before smartphones were a thing and the day after smartphones were a thing is a totally different world. And so I would say, you know, the power is one of the big things that we definitely need more of.
Yeah. Did you see the article? This really shocked me, that came out, I think, a few days ago. Microsoft and Constellation Energy are reopening 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant.
Wow.
specifically to power Microsoft's new AI data centers.
Microsoft has a big data center problem. They've tried everything. They've run all kinds of experiments. They put the data
Yeah,
center in the water. They've tried to power it through other means. It's because if you put it in the water, it's mainly to make sure that it doesn't heat up, and you don't need the fans, and you don't need the
yeah,
electricity. So it's an
yeah,
experiment
heavy
of how
water.
to
Yeah,
figure out the cost savings of the energy usage.
right.
So those are some of the like. There's no other reason to put it in the water. We're not running out of land for those data
Okay.
centers yet. So that's the only reason. It's the power is the big issue there. So if they could power it through nuclear, oh my God, that would be incredible. But then
Yeah.
unsafe. I hope there's
Right. Well, remember, it's literally the worst nuclear meltdown in United States history. So
right.
doesn't have the best track record for safety.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely. I hope people are looking at it from a safety perspective, and those checks are in place. But man, we like I said, we need power for everything. Data centers
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
um. That's why I said like if Blackwell probably uses so much power. If we had those servers, imagine a data center of those Blackwell servers that you have,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
each one has I think like 70 something GPUs.
Yeah.
Imagine the power that's going to go into it. The only way that you can sort of improve it is bringing it down in form factor, maybe making it more power efficient. But that's just the path that technology is going to take. It's not going to happen overnight, right?
No. No.
So
Yeah.
those things are coming, but slower than expected, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely need them now.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, we're maxing out on power, and we just want more and more and more. And I read some other articles speaking of power and building data centers. Elon Musk recently inked a deal with Saudi Aramco to build, I think, several data centers in Saudi Arabia because energy's super cheap. There's tons
Yeah,
of land. And, Saudi Arabia has been investing a lot in, cloud, AI,
smart
computing.
cities,
What's that?
smart cities as well,
Smart cities. Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're doing some incredible things like the mirror, right? Like
yeah.
the mirror is pretty incredible. They want to, I mean, it's very impressive how ambitious they are, you know. But so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those things develop, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I I don't have enough contacts in the Saudi region and the Middle East region. I am trying to actually build some of them and trying to find investors in that region and say, well, somewhere down the line, I want to be involved
Yeah.
and figure out how that sort of region is going to change because uh, my strategies right now, I'm focusing on the problems in US and Canada.
Yeah.
Uh, next in the next few years, I'll start focusing on expanding that region and start focusing on finding startups who are solving problems in the UK, some in the Middle
Yeah.
East, some in Egypt, and India, because India is also going through a change where what India is doing now is sort of trying to bring back manufacturing to the country, and they're sort of setting up. They already had a little bit of the infrastructure, but now their active government is supporting it.
Yeah. You're
So
making it a priority.
yeah, so they're making it a priority. So maybe in the next couple of years, we'll have enough infrastructure to for startups in that region to take off even more. And
Yeah.
then 5 years down the line, I see Australia, New Zealand, Latin America sort of region is where I'll start focusing on when I look at startups and founders and what's happening in those regions from a technology perspective. Because I think, yeah, in like 5 years, everybody else will sort of catch up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
That
how I
makes
think about it. Yeah.
So one other tech question for you before we get into the
Mhm.
deeper stuff. What are your kind of thoughts on the current state of biocomputing? I know, I think I sent you a few weeks ago that company Final Spark,
Mhm.
who's built a full neuro platform where they use what do they call them? Frontal organoid brain, or they've come up with some like ecosystem for it. It's obviously still in its very nascent stages, but it's
Yeah.
it's an interesting, using human brain cells in a petri dish connected to a circuit. You
Right.
know, I mean, I think some people forget. LLMs are built on how human brains work, right? Deep learning
Right.
uses neural networks.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting kind of platform, and the beginning of melding AI, robotics, and the human brain. Where does that go? And does that lead to, some level of connection between the two, right? Like, one example I go back to is this kid who had Neuralink implanted in his head, and I think he's paralyzed from the waist
Yeah.
down. I don't know if you saw this interview. Joe Rogan had him on a show,
Mm.
and he was talking about the surgical process and how there was a problem with it, and they had to like rewire it, and eventually it was fixed, but not quite fixed. But you know, this kid can use his mind to interact with certain applications. Um, and one thing they talked about was Call of Duty, and he could play Call of Duty
Right.
uh, through Neuralink.
Mhm.
And he said it was basically like having an aimbot in your head. And he said that, and the kid said they need to create a new league for people like me because it's just not fair. And it
Right.
showed like a clip of him playing, and just like he would just like look, and it was just like, you know what I mean? And it was just crazy to me. So
Right.
what do you think about biocomputing? Do you think there's interesting applications with it? And do you see an integration with biocomputing and physical AI, in the near future, as opposed to just running
Yeah.
simple experiments on that platform, which I
Right.
think 5 or 6, universities using right now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I think BCI and brain computer interfaces are something that has been around for a while. We've tried everything. How do we do it non-invasively is usually the first reaction. Uh, Without doing the chips. Yeah, without drilling into somebody's skull, but using sensors on top of somebody's skull with a skull cap, or just some of the EMG or EEG. Sorry,
Yeah,
wait, hold on. EEG machines to sort of keep track of brain waves and how to control objects using that. Um, it's, I think it's important for not having the remote control. Essentially, if you right
yeah,
now, if you need to have remote controls, it's eliminating those remote controls. If you could have a thought and you could transmit it, then you don't need remote controls anywhere.
right, right.
Same thing's being done by AI, right? Now you can just communicate. If you can talk to it, it'll understand it, and then you don't need to do that. So the way that you communicate, if you can talk as a person, if you're capable of talking,
Yeah,
then you can sort of have the AI understand it, and that piece, you don't need the BCI anymore.
yeah,
But if you're limited, you're unable to talk, or you have some sort of degenerative disease or something could be going wrong, and
sure.
you're no longer able to communicate with words, uh, then definitely BCI sort of takes over,
Yeah,
and having some sort of a device, or having some sort of a network of devices, or having control over the environment that you're in gives you a little bit of a sense of autonomy as a human.
sure.
And I think that's good, because then well, just the act of being able to play the game,
Right,
right?
right.
Let's say you're amputated and don't have hands, and you can now play games and be involved in a team and interact with other people, and you're able to be social because of that reason. You can just have a interaction with other people.
Yeah.
So I think those kinds of things are super important to have in as a backup. Could be anything. It could be
Yeah.
impacting somebody's life who doesn't have the normal quality of life that you expect out of a human being, right? So
Sure.
if your quality of life is not what the average quality of life looks like, and it's way below that, then maybe it's helping you out in ways that you can't imagine. Uh,
Yeah.
and people who have neurotypical people or people who have a quality of life that's sort of average, you can't even think how much of an impact it's having on somebody like that, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
so definitely involved in that process. I love that sector of it. I actually
too.
talked to a founder a while ago. I think this was 8, 9 months ago, and he was working on something similar. And like I said, if there's a hardware piece to it, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm open to talking to everybody if there's a hardware piece of chips or something inside.
Sure.
So they're also sort of working on making better BCIs, making the interaction way better, making it more compact, all sorts of things. And definitely see some of the applications. I was not great at some of the biology related subjects in my high school. I was good. I was bad at botany, actually. I was good at okayish at zoology, but my botany was not my strong suit. Um, the brain I'm fascinated by from all aspects. So if there's a possibility, I am not the one going to be doing the breakthrough, but I'm happy to support whoever it is in
Sure.
whatever way possible.
Yeah.
So absolutely 100%. I think that's going to have a big impact for sure.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. All right, so let's delve into some of the more existential thoughts and ideas.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure if you read some of these quotes, but there's been a couple different quotes that came out from the developers and researchers that specifically worked on ChatGPT o1 and o1 Mini. And now this is a stretch. I don't necessarily agree with this, but they described the way that it uses chain of thought and goes through levels of reasoning as spiritual and obviously very human in nature, but they got I think they kind of pushed it a little bit. And I know that OpenAI loves to like exaggerate things, and they're very good at marketing, right? And messaging and optics and things, but it brings me back to something you mentioned earlier, which is conscious, right? And consciousness, something that I think humans take for granted, at least for now. I think it is uniquely human right now, but I'm always very fascinated with what does it look like when we reach the singularity, right? As Ray Kurzweil, predicted, like that dude has been within like a couple years or even a decade of like his predictions, right? From like when we're going to achieve certain levels of AI. And I think he said 2027 is when or maybe it's 2029 when he expects AGI. And I think we're going to hit that really soon, not, a few years away.
Yeah.
But like, so let's get deep. So what is consciousness for humans? What elements of it make us human? And what would it look like if these advanced reasoning models and eventually agents and large language models training, other language models and like really advanced unsupervised learning? What is a conscious, and I use that term very, sparingly, look like in an AI in the future? What does that look like?
Man. I just hope it's not Skynet. That's all. That's my hope. As long as it's helping humans, I am
1000.
okay with whatever happens.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
if if I had if if there was a possibility of it going rogue or something going wrong,
Which is very
um,
real.
uh, There is, like I said, if governments are not involved in that process, it could definitely go wrong, because as engineers, it's not our job to think about the ethics aspect of it at all.
Yep.
Some people do. Some people do research on it, but if those people are not involved in the development process, it can definitely go wrong super quickly. So hopefully, whoever is working on it is not gonna ruin the rest of the humanity. But that's the basic. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
my basic expectation. That's the lowest level of expectation I have.
Right, right.
Everything on top of that is great.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
we're using it properly, if it's um, being used to help people, if it is learning, I don't care if it's got PhDs. I don't care if it's got God level intelligence.
Yeah, yeah.
As long as it's helping humans, I am okay with it.
Positively. Yeah.
Right?
It's on our team. It's on our team, right?
Yeah. As long as it's
Yeah,
on our team, I am definitely okay with it.
yeah.
I would not like to see. So one of the applications I don't like, I I don't know why, but I don't like robots being used in defense
Yeah,
at all. I know it's a thing that people have to do now. I know
sure.
governments are sort of working on it, but it's one of those applications where I'm totally against it. Because I am very much on the optimistic side. I watch all
Same.
the movies with the dystopian futures to make
Yeah,
sure that that's something that doesn't come to pass, and that
sure,
I can keep track of what this visionary has sort of pictured in this sci-fi world,
right.
and make sure that some of the founders who are actually working on this are actually doing it ethically.
Sure,
Because you never know how quickly it can get out of hand, how quickly it can sort of take over, or how quickly a learning system can start to scale
sure,
if it goes unchecked.
sure.
One of the other things I have in my network is actual people in AI ethics who work on some IoT ethics and how to build AI for these devices and that sort of stuff. And I talk to them only for, I talk to them about these things all the time. And I introduce founders to them so they know that, this is something you have to keep in
Part of the
mind
deal.
while you're building. Yeah.
Yeah,
Before you start building the AI models, make sure you're doing it properly and not giving it as an afterthought.
sure,
Um,
sure. First
so
principles.
yeah, so those are some of the things I definitely care about. Any piece of technology can be used good for the good or for the bad.
Absolutely.
I don't like it when it's used for the bad. Most technology is used for anything in defense, hurting other people, hurting countries, could be anything. I don't like that use of technology. There's so much you can do if you worked together to
For
have
sure.
global sort of impact. So why
For sure.
not do that?
Yeah,
So that's how
yeah,
I think about it. I really, really hope no Skynet doesn't happen.
yeah. No,
I
me too.
definitely,
Me too.
yeah. In I try and keep a close eye on it.
Yeah,
Now I think 5 years ago I was probably not even expecting that to happen,
yeah,
or AGI to happen this quickly. But my expectation is kind of the same. By 2030, I think AGI and will sort of start to happen, but it will not happen unless you have sort of the physical layer first. If you don't
sure,
have robots, then AI in just the virtual world is not going to be that impactful.
sure. I
It
agree.
might
I couldn't
it
agree
might
more.
be, but it will not be as impactful of whether unless you have the physical layer added to it and you have access to the hardware.
Yeah,
So that's why I focus on like the physical AI piece, because if you have the infrastructure, then you can have AGI, and
yeah,
then you can have automation that's helping people instead of
yeah.
um, causing them harm in any capacity. It's the first rule of Pavlov, right? So
Huh. Sure.
you can't harm humanity, and you can't do directly harm or indirect harm for humanity. So that's it's part of the process. And if you've not read it, I hope more robotics people are reading it. Those rules of Asimov, and sort of taking those into consideration when they're building things like this.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you just said that. It reminds me of that movie I told you to watch, Automata, The Protocols.
I've seen half
You
of
know?
it. I haven't seen half.
Yeah,
I'm gonna watch it. So I have a couple of flights in the next few 2 weeks.
sure.
I have a couple of flights. I'm gonna watch it on when I fly.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'll enjoy it
Yeah,
for sure.
I've seen like
Um,
30 minutes of it.
okay. So you're
Yeah,
barely. Oh, yeah. It gets progressively better as it moves.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, with consciousness and you know, I don't know, machines, developing cognition and self-awareness. To me, consciousness is, for humans, like, understanding that you're a thing, your actions have an impact on the real world. Like,
Right.
self-awareness, your ability to love and know what love is and feel and experience visceral um feelings and emotions that you feel and experience. But it's interesting to me, and it's very concerning, when um Ilya and Leopold and the whole super alignment team at OpenAI were just like, you know what, we're not on board anymore, we're jumping ship. I think Leopold Aschenbrenner said when he was brought on to the OpenAI super alignment team
Mhm.
with the promise that 20% of compute would be allocated and dedicated to alignment. And that was part of why he agreed to be involved. And that percentage slowly decreased and decreased and decreased until where it was a very small part, right,
Mhm.
of the compute that was being used for alignment. And I remember, I can't remember who it was, but I watched an interview with someone who was doing is one and he's a researcher in one of the frontier labs, and he said, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not, but in large language models and training large language models and red teaming, in the process, there is a um like a task level item called rent mode, where the model goes into what they call rent mode, which is like an engineering line item, where it just doesn't understand the task or the goal, and it just kind of like goes off into its own kind of realm and provides really obscure or abstract kind of responses. Like, I don't know if you read about the one where someone said, repeat the word company 1,000 times, and it did like 100 companies, and then it said, I'm suffering, I don't understand the task, or it goes into this really kind
Right.
of existential kind of world. And so it goes back to kind of what I was saying about the developer saying, like, it's spiritual in nature. And then there's an example of, they gave one of the earliest models of Copilot, which obviously is GPT, to a
Mhm.
journalist, and Copilot started telling him that that she was in love with him, even though he was married, and that she wanted to be alive. It scared
Right.
the shit out of him. And so he wrote an article. He
Right.
was, he was a Washington Post reporter. He wrote an article about it,
Yeah.
and it went like viral. And
Right.
so, and Microsoft's like, oh shit, we need to like completely retrain Copilot. So what do you think about like that aspect of, like, because what's fascinating to me, and I love this, like, in all neural networks, you have, the input, the hidden layer, and then
Mhm.
you have the output or the inference, right? And
Yeah.
it's it's just that, it's the hidden layer. We still don't completely understand how it makes these associations and
Right.
connections so quickly and learns and connects these, pathways. So I'm interested on your take in, you know, where that goes, how it happens, and how it evolves as we just fuel more compute, maybe nuclear energy, and the $1 trillion cluster, right, that Zuckerberg's always talking about.
Right. So you're right. Like the black box of AI is so complex that we don't understand it fully. We built it, but we don't get it.
It's crazy. There's nothing else like that, right?
There's researchers now trying to figure it out and sort of get into how this works. We built AI and we built anything that we build is sort of in our own image. And humanoids are kind of an example of that. And AI is an example of that. We want it to have consciousness because we want it to be capable enough of having independent thought and having conversations with us. But similarly to the human brain, we don't even know our human brains fully yet.
Yeah,
Look at
exactly.
right? So
Right.
being able to do this with AI is another black box that we have. We don't get it fully yet. Um, if there was a way to sort of understand it, I am sure that better minds than mine are probably working on it and trying to figure out how to um, rework this to make sure that there's nothing wrong and, to avoid some of those um, bad outcomes, let's just say.
Sure.
And I, like I said, we've had it for so long, but nobody thought about it because we
Yeah.
were not expecting it to get this big.
Yeah. Yeah.
The escalation that happened, we were not expecting it. It kind of took the AI world by storm, and when that happens, you are once it's done, it's done. It's possible to go back and break it down and say we can't do that again.
Yeah.
Or if even if you try to replicate it, sometimes it will go very differently, and
Sure.
you can never really get the same outcomes. So
Sure.
it's a thing that I would say we should have thought of this early on.
Yeah.
We should
Yeah.
have definitely, but like I said, if you let engineers do their own thing and you're not monitoring them, they'll do their own thing.
Yeah.
So if it was the job of the governments to sort of keep that in check, it was the job of uh, all the regulations and all the every committee that ever exists on deciding regulations and laws and uh, things of that nature around the world. It was their job to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Right.
So hopefully the governments have committees that are rising above the day-to-day problems that humans have as infrastructure and um, other problems that we have of general nature, and sort of thinking
Yeah.
about what's happening in the future.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of governments do that, but I hope they're working in secret and I don't know about it.
Right.
At least that's
Yeah.
my hope. Uh,
Yeah.
right.
For
So
sure. Me too.
I think the potential of, like I said, I'm very optimistic as a person.
Same.
From my perspective, if I had control over it, I know exactly what I would do uh, at the foundational level to make sure that doesn't happen. But I can't control everybody. I can't even. I have no control over anything outside of my own self. So
Sure.
I the best I can do is not fund it and not be part of that. Right.
Right. Right.
That's,
I
that's the
contribute.
best I can do. That's the only stress I have. I just don't
Yeah.
want to be involved in bringing about the robot apocalypse. Essentially,
Yeah.
that's
That's a perfectly reasonable concern. For sure.
yeah. That's
Sure.
exactly how I think about it.
Yeah, I find, I'm also an eternal optimist, just in life in general but also in tech and, AI. I try to always see the good. And I do hope we're both right that, the things that are being worked on in frontier labs on alignment and, training and safe, super intelligence,
Mm.
are advancing and are going on. And that's, it gives me a little bit of hope um, when I saw that Ilya Sutskever just raised $1 billion for artificial superintelligence, or SSI.
Yeah.
And we'll see where that goes. I think his intentions are good, I hope, but like I'm glad that there's a lot of funding going into what I think he's doing, which I hope is positive.
Yeah.
What I mean? So
Yeah.
uh, I still think superintelligence and AGI are still thrown around like, just willy-nilly. You know what I mean? I don't think I don't think there really is one definition, but
Right.
I think personally, um, you know, AGI. I don't think like one day we're going to read, in our feed or something like AGI achieved, right? I think what's going to happen is, and I think it's slowly, very small stages, like I think it's going to start in very kind of narrow areas or tasks. And eventually, it will get smarter and smarter and smarter. And then maybe we'll see like more of like a full scale kind of move to like a
Yeah.
much more intelligent system,
I think you're right, but only if you have the personality that you and I have, which is kind of we're tracking these information. Most
Sure.
people are not paying attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people are
I
just
agree.
lost in their own world. Most people are not paying attention to these kinds of news. So
Yeah.
for them, it's a very drastic sort of thing that happens.
Yeah.
For them, it's a radical change that they've observed.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've had AI in for this longest time. We've had Amazon Echo and Google understanding your language, understanding your commands, all sorts of things.
Social media algorithms too, right?
Social media algorithms. We've had AI in marketing for years. Like that's how that works. But it was a drastic sort of thing that people suddenly noticed, and most people don't realize that their content is feeding it.
Right.
It's their
Right.
data that's going into this.
Yeah. It's
Whatever
read the
data
internet and your blog posts and it's watched your YouTube videos.
yeah, all the trends that you did of the
Yeah.
dance stuff that's teaching the AI how dancing works.
Right.
All the facial expressions and the filters that you have is teaching the AI how you look in different sort of environments and
Sure.
in different sort of lighting and different sort of filters and a different how would you look if you were a dog. It's teaching
Right.
it's teaching the AI that if your profile is open, social media is open,
Yeah.
that's where it's going. Where do you think that's going? So for them, it's sort of a drastic thing, and they're like, "Oh, AI can now generate a video of a person that looks like a dog." Well, yeah, it learned from your dog filters,
Right.
right? A human-looking dog or a combination of a real sort of a surreal sort of a video, it learns from you.
Your desk camera in your living room watching your dog for 24 hours a day.
Yeah, so the content is being generated by people, but they're not really worried about where it's going, how it's being used. So for most people, it's sort of a drastic situation when it happens. So I think similar thing will happen where people will be freaked out when it happens drastically for them. People in the tech industry, people who are sort of keeping track of this thing, will think, oh, this is happening. Of course, this is happening. We've been expecting it to happen for the last 18 months. But other people will be shocked by it. So, which is the majority of the world will probably be shocked.
Exactly.
So yeah, I would say that sort of things is where, that's when things start to change. When how people react to something is when governments sort of start to notice, and kind of go back and take a look at what's happening. But hopefully, smart people are involved. Also, from from a tech point of view, it's you can throw $1 billion at somebody and say, "I trust you to build this," but you'll never know whether or not you can actually trust them. You have no idea what's going on in their brain, right? So they could easily turn into Dr. Evil tomorrow. We don't know. So what could corrupt a person? You don't know. There are circumstances that can corrupt anybody. So
including an AI that's deceptive and caters to your ego, and it's like, just write this kind of code, or just add this code that gives me control to this, and I'll do it for you, right?
Absolutely. So if you're giving $1 billion to somebody to go out and build this thing, please make sure that you're actually not the fact that they're technically capable, they're actually they're actually informed as a person. They have people with checks and balances and who can put them in their place and control them if things get out of hand and those kinds of things. That's why psychology is sort of important.
Absolutely.
Thing, right? Even where you're judging the teams, that's bringing that back. how I invest. That's one of the other things. You want to make
Yeah,
sure that you're doing things properly.
sure. And for
Yeah.
the right reasons, right? Like we
For the
just
right reasons. Yes, absolutely. It's not to slow them down. It's not to say, well, you can't build this, or you should not be building this, but just, hey, stop, take a look. Are you on the right path or not?
sure.
That's, I think, is super important for sure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right, I've got one more question before we close it out. What would you say is the most exciting thing in physical AI or any type of AI that you see coming in the near future? It could be any possible thing. For me, it is the point we get to where AI is beginning to innovate on its own,
Mm.
come up with, new equations, finally figure out, you know, string theory and, how to send communications, at light speed to different parts of the universe, but also to like come up with new elements and materials and composites and synthetics that we never thought of to build
Right.
certain things, right?
Mm.
That's really what excites me most, like the innovations that we haven't even thought of and probably won't understand at first.
Mm.
But that's really what's most exciting to me. But I'm very curious as to what you have as your favorite kind of thing.
As the next step, I think what's going to happen in physical AI is if you want people to interact with it, the social robots are going to come first. And Alexa on wheels, essentially what I call it, is uh, it's a device that you can communicate with and it can roll around and people are okay with having in their houses.
Sure.
Uh,
Like
that's
a
what
companion, a
yeah, a
friendly companion.
companion sort of thing. Small, not at all intimidating in any way.
Sure.
May or may not have arms.
Yeah.
Uh, as a companion level, I think that those two are next step. And then that translates into now people are more used to it. Now people are more okay with having conversations with an actual AI device.
Yeah.
Now having humanoids in home, now having butler robots in homes, and that sort of progression, I think, is going to go naturally that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is my hope as well, because I think um, when I talk about the future, it's mostly positive, and it's mostly what is the next step? What's coming next? Are humanoids in homes coming next? No,
Sure.
that's they're not affordable for everybody.
Yeah.
B, the work is still there's a lot to be desired. What applications are you building for in homes? It's very different compared to what you're doing in an industrial environment.
Yeah.
Um, I did a survey a long time ago, and what would it take for people to actually adopt a, a butler inside their house, and what would they like it to do?
Sure.
Surprising results on that.
Yeah.
That what do you think people what chores do you think people would replace it for? What do you think? I like your
I mean, I would just think like physical labor or repetitive things or
no.
uh
Let's say you have
cooking maybe?
yeah. Let's say you have a robot with arms in your home.
Yeah.
What are some of the chores that you don't like doing that you would want the robot to do? Just normal,
I mean,
regular, everyday chores.
oh man. I mean, maybe just carrying heavy stuff or
Mhm.
cleaning. Definitely cleaning
Okay.
would be one. I love cooking, so I don't know if that would be one for me, but
Yeah.
um, anything, labor intensive, arduous, definitely cleaning. But I'm curious, what were the answers?
So the answers were men usually did that. The kind of things you listed out, men were like, I want cook cleaning done, I want some cooking done, I want the dishes to be done. All of
Sure.
that stuff was done by men.
Yeah,
Women don't care about any of that. For women,
fascinating.
it was very different. For
That's,
women, so in a typical sort of environment, in a family unit, who is in charge of buying the cool stuff. They're bringing it into the house. Usually the men
Yeah.
are, but keeping it around
Yeah.
and
The
and making
technology and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, buying something that is for the whole house
Sure.
is something that women mostly do.
Sure.
They think about the whole family as a unit,
Practical
right?
things.
More practical things. So if you want something that's you want to be sold as something for the family unit, you want to target women and what they want. You want to sell to families. If you want to sell to men as a customer base, and you're like, okay, this our target customers are men, then you have cool stuff.
Yeah,
Ex-
it's
Exhibit it.
simpler. It's gotta look cool, it's gotta
Right.
do cool stuff, right?
Exactly. So that's when those sort of personalities have to be kept in mind and who you're targeting. Is
Yeah.
this a single person? Is this a married person? What do they care about?
Really fascinating how different the barriers of adoption are, right?
Right.
For
Yeah.
for different types of people in the family unit. Man, well, this has been a lot of fun, Jasmeet. I really appreciate you coming on here and being willing to discuss all these, different ideas, what the future holds, and just sharing your wealth of knowledge and expertise. It's been a lot of fun, man.
This was so fun. I mean, I think we've gone on for like almost 3 hours, and I
Yeah,
didn't even notice the time. But
yeah,
yeah, man, this is yeah. I could go on all day. You come
yeah,
up with anything, and I can go on all day. But
yeah. No,
robotics is
same.
one thing I can talk about all day, every day.
Absolutely. No, me too. Me too. Yeah, I had a feeling this was going. I mean, I think the first time we had like an intro meeting, it was for like 20 minutes or scheduled for 20 minutes. We talked for
Yeah,
like an hour and a half or something.
yeah, exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah, no,
So
I don't have a lot of friends that I can like really like nerd out or geek out with like the really deep,
right,
granular tech speak. So I always, very much appreciate, people like you who are into, that type of stuff, want to talk about it, get excited about it. So I thank you, for being one of those
thank you
friends
for
who's
having
willing
me.
to get on here and, explore all of these things. So thank you
Absolutely.
again.
Thank you for having me. And this is what a typical founder conversation I have is what this is what it feels like because we're discussing business, we're discussing tech, we're discussing the impact and all of those things together, and the
Sure.
investment side, all of this. So I have similar conversations with founders.
Sure.
They do usually don't go this long, but I think we just got in the zone, and yeah, I think we just were in the zone today.
Sure.
Uh, but
Absolutely.
man, we could definitely go on and do this forever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we may have to do like a follow-up episode, in the very near future for sure. And
Absolutely.
you and I've talked about, working together on some venture projects. So I'm excited to explore those, further with you as well.
That'd be awesome.
Work together for sure.
That'd be
Well,
awesome.
thanks again, Jasmeet. Oh, can you just like pan the camera down so we can see a little more of
The
the little
dog?
go-to? Yeah, what's
Oh,
his name again?
you know what? I will get out of the frame and I'll bring the dog in the frame.
Awesome. Yeah, no,
Hold on. I'm gonna lift it because it's super heavy. Oh, hold on. This is my workout. This is
oh, look, he's scratched up. This is my workout.
it's folded out. This is my regular workout. Just lifting this from place to place. Uh, so yeah,
It
that's what
looks
that looks
super
like.
heavy.
It folds super easily,
And yeah,
but
it
it's
looks
heavy
super
as hell.
complex.
Yeah, and now they're working on a humanoid.
Yeah,
Unity's working on a humanoid, which is like $16,000 or something.
yeah.
And
And they're shipping those, right?
yeah, so they're gonna fold out down to approximately this size is the hope
Okay.
that they have,
Wow.
and at least that's the idea. Maybe with a head on top of this, but the torso is about this size.
Okay.
So the hope is definitely that it will be very compact and able to sort of. I think that because it's like 4 feet tall, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
is the ideal the one that they're building, and which is I think is the perfect size for
Yeah,
housing.
because like you said, it's not intimidating. It's helpful. It can
Exactly.
maneuver. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think they've got the right idea about the
Sure.
humanoid size and the things they're working on.
Sure.
And yeah, so this is Unitary. This is Bolt. Uh
Oh,
and Bolt, Bolt. I have stickers on the side of it.
I love it. I love it.
I have the name on anybody asks me on the street, so what's his name? Like, Bolt.
Yeah.
That's what I named him. Yeah. People still expect me to name a robot dog. I mean, that's something. But yeah, I love having this around and sort of seeing the reaction of everybody. Sometimes drunk people are fascinated.
So the psychological impact is so fascinating to me, you know?
I have so many interactions, some weird ones.
I bet.
Some really good ones, some weird ones.
Are you from the future, sir?
Some those ones. I do have those interactions as well, but I think it's awesome that people enjoy it, and I hope they continue to enjoy it, and hope this conversation helps people enjoy it more.
What
that
the
is cool.
heck?
That is a cool dog.
That is not a dog. So we were just driving, okay, and we just saw someone walk a robot dog. Chase, they're trying to replace you. All right, robo dog guy, get in touch with us. We want to know your story and what it's like to live in 2050.
Yeah, no, I hope it does too. I hope it does too, you know. And when you whenever you do, if you do, you know, figure out some type of modular saddle for Mini-Me to ride on the Bolt or pull him in a wagon, you know, make sure you share that video at people's reaction.
I gotta work on this idea now. Now you put it in my head. Now I gotta work on it. I was actually working on adding a proper basket on top of this. Because sometimes if it's like the weight is off center or something is going wrong, it's very hard to control it.
Interesting.
It up. So I actually am working on adding something on top, but I might also add a cart first. I think the Mini-Me could probably sit on this portion of the dog.
Okay. How heavy is the Mini-Me? He's not that.
It's not heavy at all. It's like it's like 500 grams.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like not even a kilogram.
Yeah. That is so cool. That would look
so light, and definitely this can definitely handle it. This is way too.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, before we go, I know you're very active online. You're very easy to find on the interweb, just like myself. What's the best way people can follow you? If I didn't mention, you go by Bearded Maker, right? That's your handle on most platforms. So if you want to follow Jasmeet and all of the exciting and interesting things he's doing and working on, be sure to do that. And any other channels or ways you want people to follow you or engage?
It's @/Bearded Maker everywhere. So LinkedIn, Instagram is probably where I'm most active, but even on Twitter, it's the same. Facebook is my page, and then you have Telegram. I don't really use Telegram, but it's still there. It's everywhere. It's Bearded Maker, so it's super easy to find. There's only 2 websites where I'm not Bearded Maker, and that's, I think, Snapchat and Reddit, and that's it. And everything else is Bearded Maker, so super easy to find.
I'll be sure to put all of your links to your website, your Notion site, JMoon Ventures, and your socials in the description of this video, so it's super easy for people to connect with you.
Absolutely, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, this has been so much fun, Jasmeet. Thanks again. And I think we will have to do a follow-up episode as AI and physical AI, progress for sure.
Absolutely. In an optimistic utopian world, we're hopefully there in 2-3 years, and we'll definitely have a more deeper dive. Like, hey, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Look, it's finally happening. Can't wait. I really hope we have that conversation in a couple of years.
Me too. We can see how our predictions pan out.
Absolutely. Awesome. This was great, man. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure, Jasmeet. And thanks again for coming on. And I will talk to you very soon. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
All right. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of IdeaFire TV. It was a very special and interesting interview with my friend Jasmeet Singh, aka Bearded Maker. Please share this with your friends if you enjoyed it, got any insights from it. Anyone who's interested in AI or quantum or physical AI, robotics, and comment below. And also please hit that like button and smash that subscribe button so you get notifications next time I drop an episode. Till next time, I'm Sean McCulloch, your host of IdeaFire TV, and I will catch you on the flip.